A millionaire is saved by a homeless woman. Days later, he hires her to work in his company, but what she did left him shocked, and a secret she was hiding completely changed his life. Before we dive into the story, leave a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. John Wick was attending an event, but decided to leave early to avoid the long, dull speeches. Walking on foot to meet his driver, he absent-mindedly turned a corner and realized too late he had entered an alley. Before he could turn back, 3 men appeared, their faces a mix of opportunism and menace. "Well, look what we have here, a rich guy lost in the wrong part of town," one of them sneered. John stayed calm, but his heart raced. He wasn't naive. He knew they weren't there for small talk. "You want money?" he asked, trying to keep the situation under control. "We want everything. Big shot, watch, wallet," the man said, stepping closer. Before John could respond, a firm voice rang out from the end of the alley. "The police are on their way. I suggest you leave before it's too late." The men turned to see a young woman standing there, holding a metal rod. Her clothes were worn. Her face showed the harshness of life on the streets, but her determination was unshakable. "And who are you to tell us what to do?" one of them said, trying to intimidate her. He reached for the rod, but she swiftly struck him on the head. "I called the police," she said firmly. "If you're smart, you'll run now." The men hesitated. The faint sound of sirens, even if not intended for them, made the leader's companions exchange worried glances. "Let's go." "It's not worth it," one of them muttered. "This isn't over, rich boy," the leader threatened before disappearing into the shadows with the others. John stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. His eyes finally met the woman's. She was still gripping the rod tightly. "Did you really call the police?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. She smiled faintly, lowering the rod. "No, I don't even have a phone, but they didn't need to know that." John remained silent for a moment, taking in the reality of what had just transpired. This woman, with her worn-out clothes and tired expression, had saved his life. "Thank you," he said, finally breaking the silence. "No need to thank me. Just be more careful where you walk," she replied, already turning to leave. But something about her confidence, her indifference, compelled him to speak again. "Wait," he called out, stepping toward her. She stopped and turned slowly, as if she already knew what he was going to say. "At least let me repay you, and tell me your name." She looked at him, her gaze steady. "My name is Layla, and I didn't do it for money. Even if I had, I doubt you could give me what I really need." "Then tell me, what do you need?" He didn't know why he was pressing, but something about her intrigued him deeply. She was quiet for a moment, weighing whether it was worth answering. Finally she spoke. "A new life. But I don't think that's something you can provide." He frowned, even more intrigued. Without thinking, he pulled a card from his pocket and held it out to her. "My name is John Wick. If you ever change your mind, call me." She hesitated before taking the card, her eyes searching his for sincerity. "Maybe I will," she said, slipping the card into her pocket before vanishing into the night. 2 days passed, but the image of the young woman lingered in John's mind. He told himself it was mere curiosity. After all, it wasn't every day someone so unexpected crossed his path. While reviewing reports in his office, his routine was interrupted by a call from his receptionist. "Mr. Wick, there's a woman here to see you. She says you know her." Not knowing what to expect, he went down to the lobby. There she was, the same woman who had saved him in the alley. But now, she was cleaner and carried a serious expression. "I can't believe I'm here, but I didn't have a choice. I need your help." Her voice was firm, but he caught a slight tremor, betraying her hesitation. John studied the young woman in front of him, feeling the same curiosity he'd felt in the alley. There was something about her, something he couldn't quite place, that fascinated him. He was used to people asking for things, but Layla was different. She seemed almost reluctant to be there, as if asking for help was her last resort. "So, Layla, what can I do for you?" John crossed his arms, maintaining the professional demeanor he often used in negotiations. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "I need a job, anything that can give me some stability to start over. And since you said I could call..." She paused as if reconsidering every word. "Here I am." John thought for a moment. Hiring a stranger, especially someone coming from the streets, was risky. but he also knew the instincts that had brought him to the top of the business world rarely failed. And his instincts told him that Layla wasn't just anyone. "All right," he spoke with the calm confidence of someone accustomed to leading. "I have an opening for a personal assistant. The job is simple. Accompany me to events, manage schedules, handle day-to-day tasks. Do you think you can do it?" Layla looked at him, surprised. She clearly hadn't expected such a direct response, let alone such a good offer. But her expression quickly hardened, as if she were trying to protect herself. "Why are you giving me this opportunity?" "You don't even know me," Layla said. John gave a slight smile. "Because you have courage, and I want to see where that can take you." She stared at him for a few more seconds before giving a small nod. "All right, I'll take it." Layla started the next day. She showed up promptly at 7 in the morning, wearing simple clothes that were clearly borrowed or bought secondhand. John welcomed her into his office, where the team was already busy at work. Introducing her to the others brought predictable reactions. Curious glances, hushed whispers, and even a few disdainful looks. But John didn't care. He knew that most people in his company were more concerned with appearances than results, and Layla had already shown she had more than appearances. She had determination. "Here's your desk." He led her to a spot near his office where a chair and computer were waiting. "Your first task is to organize the week's appointments. I want everything detailed and mistake-free." "Mistake-free. Got it." Layla replied with a touch of sarcasm he hadn't expected. John smirked slightly. He liked that. It was interesting to work with someone who wasn't afraid to speak their mind. As she began to familiarize herself with the job, John observed her from a distance. Layla was efficient, even without corporate experience. She had a natural ability to learn quickly and solve problems. Yet he also noticed a barrier around her, something she clearly wasn't ready to share. During the lunch break, John found her in the break room, sitting alone and eating a sandwich she'd brought in simple wrapping. He pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "How's it going so far?" he asked. "Good. It's not as complicated as I thought," she said. "Great. But if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." He paused, then added, "You know you don't have to bring your own lunch, right? We have a buffet service for all employees." She looked up, wary. "I'm not here to take advantage of benefits. I just want to do my job." John nodded, respecting her stance. But inwardly, he wondered how long it would take for Layla to realize she didn't have to be on guard all the time. As the days passed, Layla started adjusting to the environment. She was efficient, but kept her distance from everyone, including John. That didn't stop her from standing out. During an important meeting with investors, she spotted a critical error in the financial reports and corrected it before anyone else noticed. Her precision impressed even the most experienced employees. After the meeting, John called her into his office. "You saved the day today." He gestured for her to sit down. "How did you catch that mistake so quickly?" Layla gave a small smile, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I used to be good with numbers, before everything fell apart." John didn't press further. He knew she would talk when she was ready, but that brief glimpse into Layla's past only deepened his curiosity. Despite the progress, not everything was easy. Some colleagues didn't hide their prejudice toward Layla. One afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she overheard two employees talking. "What do you think she did to get this job? Maybe she has something on the boss. There's no way he hired her just for her skills." Layla stopped in the hallway, but didn't turn around. Instead, she took a deep breath and kept walking. She knew it wasn't worth confronting them, but their words lingered in her mind. The next day, John noticed something unusual. During a discussion about an important project, one of the same employees who had criticized Layla tried to dismiss her opinion. However, Layla stood her ground. "If you think my idea doesn't make sense, I can explain it better. Or would you prefer I just agree with everything you say?" she said, smiling, though there was a clear challenge in her tone. John watched the scene with a mix of pride and admiration. Layla wasn't just brave. She knew how to handle adversity without losing her composure. That night, John stayed late at the office. While reviewing reports, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Looking up, he saw Layla standing at the door. "Still here?" he asked, surprised. "I wanted to thank you for giving me this chance. I know it wasn't easy for you," she said. John tilted his head, studying her. "You're doing better than I expected, but something tells me I haven't seen everything you're capable of yet," he said. She let out a soft laugh. "Maybe you're right." As she walked away, John felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Layla was different from anyone else there. Time flew by, and Layla's presence in John's company started to have an unexpected impact. She worked with focus and efficiency, but her straightforward attitude and reserved personality kept her a mystery to everyone. John observed her closely, intrigued by how someone with so little could adapt so well to the corporate world. He knew Layla was hiding something, but he wasn't the type to push. He preferred to let things unfold naturally. However, during an ordinary afternoon meeting with his team, Layla surprised him again. "Mr. Wick, before we proceed with the proposal, I notice there's a clause here that could cause legal problems down the line," she said, pointing out a detail in a document. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, and a few whispered comments could be heard. After all, who did she think she was to point out a mistake in such an important meeting? John, however, leaned in to examine what Layla had identified. After a few seconds, he nodded slowly. "She's right," he said, looking around at the others. "If we don't fix this now, we could face serious complications." Though no one said anything, their reactions were clear. Some seemed impressed, while others looked uncomfortable. Layla, however, remained composed. After the meeting, John called her into his office. "You have a sharp eye for detail. Where did you learn that?" he asked, closing the door. Layla hesitated for a moment before replying. "I've always been good with contracts and numbers," she said vaguely, clearly avoiding specifics. "That's more than just being good. You caught something no one else did, not even my lawyers." John crossed his arms, studying her. "There's more to you than you're letting on, isn't there?" Layla avoided his gaze but didn't answer. The silence that followed was almost as revealing as any words she could have said. John decided not to press further. He knew the answers would come in due time. Later that week, John was invited to a charity event and decided to bring Layla as his professional guest. He wanted to test her in a more challenging environment where etiquette and formalities were as crucial as business itself. "Have you ever been to an event like this?" he asked as they walked toward the main hall. "Not exactly," she replied, glancing around curiously. The hall was stunning, with crystal chandeliers and impeccably set tables. Guests wore expensive attire and spoke in hushed tones, creating an air of exclusivity. John watched Layla out of the corner of his eye, trying to gauge her reactions. Surprisingly, she seemed at ease. Although her clothing wasn't the most sophisticated, Layla carried herself with elegance, as if the setting wasn't entirely foreign to her. As they approached a table filled with prominent investors, John was greeted with polite smiles and handshakes. He introduced Layla as his assistant, and to his surprise, she handled herself well, confidently contributing to the conversation. "You've got a sharp team, John," one of the investors remarked, clearly impressed by Layla's insights. "I always choose the best people," John replied, his gaze lingering on Layla. Later in the evening, John stepped away to grab a drink. When he returned, he found Layla speaking with an older woman who seemed particularly interested in her. "So, how do you know John?" the woman asked, smiling politely. Layla hesitated. She knew she couldn't reveal the full truth. "I've only been working as his assistant for a short time," she replied, keeping a neutral tone. "Assistant? Interesting. You carry yourself differently, like someone who's been in a place like this before." Layla didn't respond, but the comment lingered in her mind. Once the conversation ended, she found John near the bar. "People love to analyze everything, don't they?" she said, trying to ease the tension. "It's part of the game," he replied, handing her a glass of water. "But you handled it well." Layla gave a faint smile and changed the subject, but John could tell there was something in her past that didn't quite add up. The next morning, while working in the office, John started looking into Layla's background. He didn't know exactly what he was hoping to find, but he wanted answers. After some searching, he came across something that caught his attention. An old article about a high-society family caught in a devastating financial scandal. At the center of the story was a young woman who looked remarkably like Layla. He printed the article and kept it to ask her later. That afternoon, while they were organizing documents in his office, Layla dropped a photo. As she reached to pick it up, John noticed something interesting. It was a portrait of a young woman standing beside an elegant couple, the same young woman he'd seen in the article. "Who's this?" John asked, pointing at the photo. Layla quickly picked up the envelope, tucking the photo back inside. "No one important." Her voice was firm, but John noticed her hands trembling slightly. "I found something today," he said, showing her the printed article. "You're Layla Reed, from the Reed family, aren't you?" Layla froze. For a moment it looked like she was deciding whether to deny it or finally tell the truth. After a few seconds, she took a deep breath. "Yes, I am. Or at least, I was." John stared at Layla, holding the article firmly, though his voice remained calm, contrasting with the tension in the air. Layla glanced at the document briefly before looking away, as if the words on the page could cut open old wounds. "Why didn't you ever mention this?" he asked, his tone steady, the same one he used during critical business decisions. Layla took another deep breath, as though gathering the courage to confront a difficult truth. "Because that's not my life anymore." Her voice, though controlled, carried a weight John recognized. "My family lost everything, John. When that happens, you learn to leave the past behind." John set the article down on the desk, his eyes still on her. "Leaving the past behind is one thing. But this," he gestured to the article. "This explains your family's downfall, but it doesn't explain how you ended up on the streets." Layla pressed her lips together, clearly hesitant. After a moment of silence, she finally spoke. "My father tried to keep up appearances while everything was falling apart. When he realized it was all collapsing, he decided to turn me into a solution." John frowned, confused. "A solution?" "He arranged a marriage for me," Layla said bluntly, her voice tinged with anger. "I was supposed to be a gift for one of the investors, someone who could inject enough money to save the company." Her words hung in the air like an irreversible verdict. John couldn't hide his shock. He had seen calculated and cold business decisions, but using one's own daughter as a bargaining chip crossed every conceivable line. "So, you ran away?" "Yes, I did." She crossed her arms as if trying to shield herself from painful memories. "I left before it was too late, but running away comes with a price. I learned that the hard way." John didn't respond immediately. He understood what it was like to grow up under suffocating family expectations, but he'd never faced anything so extreme. He watched her, trying to figure out what she needed to hear in that moment. "The article mentions that your family's collapse started with a canceled contract from one of my companies." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "How much did you know about that?" Layla blinked, surprised. For a moment it seemed like he'd said something entirely new to her. "Nothing. I never knew exactly what happened." She seemed genuine, though there was a note of doubt in her voice. "All I heard was what my father used to say, that our business partners abandoned us when we needed them most." Silence filled the room again. John felt a wave of discomfort. He wasn't one to shy away from responsibility, but at that moment he realized there was a real chance he might have contributed, even indirectly, to the downfall of this young woman. Later that night, John went to his office. He opened old drawers and digital files he hadn't looked at in years, searching for answers. After hours of searching, he found an old report. It was from a merger early in his career as CEO. Among the clauses, there was a decision to terminate contracts with smaller companies that weren't delivering results. One of those companies was Reed Enterprises. The document also included recommendations from external financial consultants, emphasizing the need for cold decisions to preserve the merger's profitability. John recognized his signature on the last page, approving the actions. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a mix of guilt and frustration. Even though it hadn't been a direct decision, he knew that as CEO, the ultimate responsibility was his. And now, he didn't know how to tell Layla. He was afraid she might never forgive him. In the days that followed, Layla noticed John was quieter than usual. Although he was generally reserved, he now seemed distant, lost in thought. She could tell that learning about her family had shaken him, but she chose not to press him. Their relationship was built on a fragile foundation, and any added pressure could unsettle the little they had developed. Over the next few days, John seemed even more determined to help her. He started delegating fewer tasks to the team and working directly with Layla on major projects. It was as though he wanted to make up for past mistakes by helping her excel. "Here's the draft of the new hotel project," Layla said, placing the papers on John's desk. He picked them up, carefully reviewing the notes. "Excellent work," John said, pausing to look at her. "You know you have a talent for this, don't you?" Layla gave a slight smile but avoided lingering on the topic. "I just want to do my best." But John knew there was more to it. Layla wasn't just efficient, she seemed determined to prove something, to herself or perhaps to the world. Later that week, while organizing old company files for a project, Layla came across a folder that caught her attention. It was a set of detailed financial reports, all related to the period when her family faced bankruptcy. Among the pages, she saw something that made her heart race, a memo signed by John. The message emphasized the importance of cost-cutting measures and terminating contracts with underperforming companies. Layla felt a mix of shock and anger. It wasn't just a bureaucratic decision, it was a sentence that had changed her life. She grabbed the papers and went straight to John's office. When she entered, he was on the phone but quickly ended the call when he saw her. "Layla? What's going on?" She placed the documents on his desk, crossing her arms as she stared at him. "You knew." Her voice was steady, but there was pain in it. "You knew what those decisions meant for companies like mine." John looked at the papers and immediately recognized the memo. He took a deep breath before responding. "I didn't know the full impact, Layla," he said, meeting her gaze. "At the time, I was only thinking about the numbers, about keeping the company stable." "And what about the people?" she asked, frustration clear in her tone. "Did you think about the families that would be affected?" John didn't answer right away. He knew any explanation would sound hollow at that moment. "I can't change what happened," he finally said, "but I want to help you move forward." Layla closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm herself. She knew he was being honest, but it was still hard to accept that her pain had been caused by such cold decisions. "I don't want charity, John." Her voice softened, but it was still firm. "What I want is to understand why people like you think they can decide others' fates without considering the consequences." John hadn't expected that response. He realized Layla wasn't just questioning the past, she was trying to understand the logic of a world she hadn't chosen. "You're right," he said slowly, carefully choosing his words. "I was wrong about many things, but I'm trying to be different now." Layla didn't respond, but something in her expression showed she was beginning to believe in his intentions, even if she wasn't yet sure how to fully trust him. That night, as John reviewed more old reports, he found something unexpected. Among the notes from board meetings, there was a name he recognized: Raymond Carter. Raymond was the investor who, years ago, had been the key figure in the merger that led to the cancellation of smaller contracts, including those of Reed Enterprises. At the time, John had trusted Raymond's recommendations and those of his advisors, but now, as he reviewed the details, he noticed something unusual. There was a discrepancy between the numbers Raymond had presented and what had actually been executed. It appeared that the decisions had been manipulated to benefit a select group of investors while harming others. John closed the report, his mind racing. He knew Raymond was a strategic player, but he had never imagined he might have intentionally sabotaged smaller companies to increase his profits. The next morning, John called Layla into his office. He knew that, as difficult as it might be, she deserved to hear what he had discovered. "Layla, there's something I need to show you," he said, handing her the report. She read it carefully, her eyes narrowing as she processed the implications. "So, Raymond Carter was behind this?" she asked, still coming to terms with what she was reading. "It seems so," John nodded. "He manipulated the data to justify canceling contracts and ensure his own profit." Layla felt anger welling up inside her. The name Raymond Carter was familiar. He was the investor her father had desperately tried to negotiate with before everything fell apart. "He knew this would destroy my family," she said, her voice low but filled with emotion. John watched her, noticing how hard she was fighting to keep her anger from consuming her. I'm going to deal with this, he said. How? Layla challenged him, meeting his gaze. This happened years ago. What can you do now? John gave her a faint smile, but his eyes carried a steely determination. More than you think. Over the following days, John began taking steps to expose Raymond's actions. He used his connections and influence to initiate investigations into the contracts from that time. Layla followed his progress closely, torn between skepticism and hope. Why are you doing this? She asked during a private moment. Because it's the right thing to do, he replied simply. Layla didn't know what to make of it. Despite everything, she sensed that John truly wanted to make amends for the mistakes of the past. But she also knew it wouldn't be enough to erase the scars. The investigation into Raymond Carter started as a quiet review of old company records. What initially seemed like routine due diligence quickly caught the attention of influential figures in the industry. Carter's name began circulating in private meetings, and it was clear that people feared the consequences of his dark past being revealed. John knew that revisiting old scandals would stir trouble. He had faced powerful adversaries before, but even he was surprised by how aggressively Raymond reacted. Within days, John received anonymous messages and strange phone calls. Clear warnings that someone wanted to send a message. It wasn't hard to guess who. Layla, meanwhile, felt conflicted. She admired John's determination to do what was right, but she worried he was putting himself at risk for something she had long accepted as a tragic part of her past. You don't have to do this, John, she said one evening as they reviewed documents. I don't have to, but I want to, he replied without hesitation. If I can fix even part of the damage I caused, it's worth it. Layla knew there was no point in arguing. Something had changed in John. A transformation she couldn't ignore. He wasn't the cold, distant man she had met in the beginning. This new version of him was driven by a sense of justice she never expected to see. A few days later, while Layla was organizing files in John's office, she noticed something unusual. A plain envelope with no sender information was sitting on his desk. It hadn't been there before, and no one had entered the office since she'd arrived. Curious, she opened the envelope and found a recent photo of herself. Along with the photo was a brief but threatening message. Stay out of this, or we all lose. Layla felt a chill run down her spine. The threat was clear, and whoever had sent it knew exactly what was going on. She grabbed the photo and went straight to John, interrupting his meeting with the company's directors. We need to talk. Now, she said firmly, ignoring the curious looks from the others in the room. John dismissed the directors and followed Layla to his office. Once the door was closed, she showed him the envelope and the photo. This was left on your desk, she said, trying to stay calm. John examined the contents, his expression turning serious. This confirms what I was afraid of, he said, tossing the photo onto the desk. Carter knows we're getting close to the truth. And he's trying to intimidate us, Layla added. John, I think we should stop this. It's not worth it. He looked at her, his determination unwavering. It is worth it. If anyone thinks they can intimidate you or stop me with threats, they're underestimating how much this matters. Layla wanted to insist, but she knew John wouldn't back down. There was a stubbornness in him that, while frustrating, was also admirable. As John delved deeper into his investigation, Layla started noticing something odd. He was spending more and more time in the office, sometimes reviewing documents late into the night. She couldn't understand how he managed to stay focused, but began to realize he seemed to be carrying a heavier burden than he let on. One evening, while they worked together, Layla broke the silence. Why is this so important to you, John? She asked, looking at him from across the table. It's not just about fixing mistakes, is it? John paused for a moment, as if carefully choosing his words. It's about who I want to be, Layla. For so long, I only cared about numbers, about success. But meeting you made me realize there's more to life than that. Layla stayed quiet, absorbing his words. There was something genuine in his tone, a vulnerability she hadn't expected. Do you think it will change anything? She asked softly. Maybe not for everyone, but for you, I hope it will. Days later, as John worked with his lawyers to gather evidence against Carter, something unexpected happened. He received a call from an unknown number. Wick, a deep voice said on the other end. You're playing a dangerous game, Walk away while you still can. Carter? John immediately recognized the voice. You've got a lot to lose, John. I, on the other hand, already know how to win. Don't make me show you what I'm capable of. John gripped the phone tightly, keeping his voice steady. I'm not afraid of you, Carter. Try whatever you want, but I'm taking this all the way. The call ended abruptly, but John knew the threat was real. Carter wasn't the kind of man who bluffed, and now this was more than just business. That night, as Layla reviewed documents one last time, she found something that would change everything. It was a contract signed by Carter detailing not only the financial cuts, but also a larger scheme to acquire Reed Enterprises shares for a fraction of their actual value. She rushed to John with the contract, her hands trembling as she held the paper. Look at this. Her voice was filled with emotion. John examined the contract, his eyes narrowing as he read. This is enough evidence, he finally said. We can use this to expose everything, Layla nodded, but fear was evident in her expression. What if he tries to do something to you, John? He's already threatening us. John gave a faint smile, though he knew her concern was valid. Don't worry about me. I've always known that standing up to people like Carter comes with risks. Layla wanted to believe he was prepared, but deep down, she feared what could happen. The tension grew with each passing day. The threats against John and Layla made it clear that Raymond Carter was willing to do anything to protect his secrets. While John remained steadfast, Layla couldn't hide her worry. The man who had helped her so much was now risking everything, and she didn't know if she could handle the thought of losing him. One afternoon, as they reviewed the final documents in a small office, a loud noise came from downstairs. It was the kind of sound that made your heart race, like something heavy falling. John looked at Layla, who seemed frozen. Stay here, he said quickly, getting up to check what was happening. John, don't! Layla tried to stop him, but he was already leaving the room. Heading downstairs, John found the front door wide open, swinging in the wind. Papers were scattered across the floor, and the space looked like it had been ransacked in a hurry. Something caught his eye. In the middle of the room was a note pinned to a shattered picture frame. This is your warning. Stop now. John took a deep breath, trying to contain his anger. He went back upstairs to the office, where Layla was waiting. Was it Carter? She asked as soon as he walked in. John handed her the note without saying a word. Layla read it and felt a knot in her stomach. They were playing with fire, and Carter was making it clear he wouldn't hesitate to escalate. This has to stop, John, Layla said firmly, though her voice carried a note of desperation. I don't want you to get hurt over this. Layla, this isn't just about you. It's about all the people Carter has hurt. John's gaze locked on hers, his eyes filled with determination. I can't let this man go unpunished. She knew arguing was pointless. John had made up his mind and nothing would deter him. Yet, the fear of what might happen to him gnawed at her. That night, Layla stayed at John's mansion. He had insisted it was safer for her to remain there until the situation was resolved. But the safety of the house wasn't enough to quiet her thoughts. While John worked on documents downstairs, Layla wandered through the living room. Her hands trembled and her chest felt heavy. She couldn't deny it anymore. She was growing attached to him in a way she hadn't expected. John wasn't just an employer or someone helping her rebuild her life. He was becoming something more. Determined to confront her feelings, she went downstairs and found John sitting in an armchair with his laptop. He was so focused, he didn't notice her until she spoke. You can't carry this alone, John. He looked up, surprised by the tone in her voice. I'm not alone. I have you. The words were simple but hit Layla like a wave. She stepped closer and sat in the armchair next to his. What if something happens to you? Her voice was quieter than she intended. John was silent for a moment before answering. Nothing will happen. I promise. Layla wanted to believe him, but she knew promises like that were hard to keep. She sighed, leaning forward slightly. John, I don't know how we got here, but I feel like we're connected in a way I can't explain. John looked at her, his expression softening. He closed the laptop and set it aside. I feel it too, and as much as I try to make sense of it, the truth is, it doesn't matter how or why. What matters is that it's happening. Layla felt a rush of emotion as he spoke. For a moment, The weight of threats and problems faded, leaving only the connection between them. John reached for her hand, and she let him. "Layla, I don't know where this will lead, but I want you to know that I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone else." She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I care about you too, John." For a moment, they sat in silence, holding each other's hands. It was as if the outside world didn't exist. The next day, John received a call from an important legal contact. The evidence against Carter was complete and ready to be presented in court. John knew this would be a devastating blow to Carter, but it also meant the final confrontation was near. "We have what we need," John told Layla after hanging up the phone. "Carter will be exposed, and there's nothing he can do to stop it." Layla felt a mix of relief and worry. "What happens now?" "Now I turn this over to the authorities." He gave her a faint smile. "But Carter won't go down without a fight. We need to be prepared." Layla nodded, though she wasn't sure how they could prepare for something so unpredictable. She knew Carter was dangerous, but she trusted John's determination. That evening, as John prepared to hand over the evidence, a car pulled up in front of the mansion. The doorbell rang, and a security guard announced an unexpected visitor. John went to the door and found a man in an expensive suit. He immediately recognized the face. It was one of Carter's lawyers. "Wick, Carter asked me to deliver a personal message." The man handed him an envelope and left without another word. John opened the envelope right there. Inside was a single sentence. "If you move forward, you'll destroy more than you think." John clenched the paper tightly, his face betraying no emotion. He knew Carter was trying to intimidate him again, but this time he wasn't backing down. Returning inside, he found Layla waiting anxiously in the living room. "What was it?" she asked. "Another threat," he said, shaking his head as he placed the note on the table. "But it's too late for him now." Layla didn't respond but felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She knew the confrontation with Carter was imminent, and after that, nothing would be the same. The tension in John's mansion was nearly unbearable. The final showdown with Carter was getting closer, and while John was resolute in seeing it through, Layla couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. The next morning, John prepared to deliver the documents to the district attorney. It was a decisive moment, and he knew he couldn't delay any longer. Layla watched him from a distance, her stomach in knots. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" she asked, her voice heavy with worry. "We don't have another choice, Layla," John replied, adjusting his jacket. "Carter's already shown us what he's capable of. The longer we wait, the more dangerous he becomes." Layla wanted to argue but knew he was right. Still, the fear of what could happen to him was almost paralyzing. "Just be careful, please." Her voice almost broke, but she held his gaze. John gave her a small smile, trying to reassure her. "I promise." A few hours later, as John headed to the district attorney's office, Layla stayed at the mansion, unable to focus on anything. She tried to distract herself, but her thoughts kept returning to John and the risk he was taking. Then, the unexpected happened. The sound of screeching tires at the mansion's entrance caught her attention. Before she could react, men stormed into the property. Layla tried to run but was cornered before she could reach the back door. "Where's Wick?" one of the men demanded, gripping her tightly. "I don't know," she replied. The man didn't seem convinced, but instead of pressing her further, he barked a quick order to the others. "Take her. He'll show up for her." Layla was forced into a black van and taken away. John was wrapping up his meeting with the district attorney when he received the call that changed everything. The voice on the other end was cold and threatening. "Wick, we've got your girl. If you want to see her again, you'll drop everything about those documents." John's blood boiled, but he kept his composure. "Where is she?" "You're not in a position to ask questions," the voice said with a slight laugh. "I'll call back with instructions. Don't try anything stupid." The line went dead before John could respond. He gripped the phone so tightly he nearly crushed it. He knew Carter was behind this, and there was no time to waste. While Layla was being held in an abandoned warehouse, she tried to stay calm. She knew John would come for her. She looked around, searching for anything that could help her escape, but the men guarding her gave her no openings. Still, her mind raced. If she couldn't find a way out, she would have to stall until John arrived. Meanwhile, John mobilized every connection he had. He tracked the van's last location and found clues leading him to the warehouse where Layla was being held. But instead of involving the police, he decided to go alone. He knew Carter wouldn't hesitate to hurt Layla if he felt cornered. When he arrived, John carefully analyzed the area before making his move. He spotted 2 men at the entrance. Using his experience in high-pressure situations, he managed to approach without being noticed. Inside the warehouse, Layla heard footsteps and became alert. One of the men went out to check the commotion, but didn't return. She knew something was happening. Then the door opened, and John entered, his eyes locked on her. "John," she exclaimed, a mix of relief and fear in her voice. "It's okay. I'm getting you out of here," he said, his voice calm but determined. Before they could leave, Carter appeared, flanked by 2 more men. "Wick, you really don't know when to quit, do you?" Carter said with a cynical smile. "Let her go, Carter. This ends now," John said, standing his ground despite being outnumbered. Carter laughed, but before he could respond, Layla seized the moment. She shoved a nearby stack of crates, that causing a distraction. John used the opportunity to free Layla, grabbing her hand and leading her out before more reinforcements arrived. Back at the mansion, Layla was shaken but relieved. John, however, seemed more focused than ever. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Not yet," John replied, looking out into the distance. "But Carter's lost. Now we have everything we need to ensure he can't hurt anyone else." Layla looked at him, a mix of gratitude and something deeper in her expression. "John, thank you for not giving up on me." He turned to her, his eyes revealing a rare vulnerability. "I would never give up on you, Layla." Without thinking, she hugged him, and he embraced her in return. For a moment, nothing else mattered but the fact that they were together and safe. News of the confrontation between John and Raymond Carter spread quickly within business circles. While Carter had not yet been formally charged, the exposure of his schemes was starting to shake his influence. The documents and evidence John had gathered were now in the hands of the authorities, and the prosecutor was confident that Carter would soon face the consequences of his actions. At John's mansion, Layla was trying to adjust to her new reality. Though she was safer now, the emotional weight of recent events still lingered. Every time she thought about what could have happened, she felt a tightness in her chest. But John was always nearby, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. "You should get some rest," he said one evening, finding her poring over contracts and reports. "I can't." Layla sighed, rubbing her temples. "It feels like there's always something to do, something left unfinished." John walked over and set a cup of hot tea on her desk. "You don't have to carry this alone, Layla. I'm here." She looked at him and for a moment allowed herself to relax. "Thank you, John, for everything." The next day, John's attorney brought an important update. Carter had tried to use his influence to delay the case, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His network of allies was beginning to crumble, and he was becoming increasingly cornered. "He'll try to flee before everything comes to light," the attorney warned. "We need to make sure he doesn't disappear before the trial." John nodded, knowing the endgame was near. He'd dealt with powerful figures before, but never someone as ruthless as Carter. Meanwhile, Layla decided to visit the shelter where she had stayed before meeting John. She felt the need to reconnect with that part of her life, even though it was painful. At the shelter, she encountered familiar faces and stories that reminded her why she wanted to rebuild her life. A young woman named Mia approached her, holding a tattered blanket. "You're Layla, right?" Mia asked, her eyes bright. "I heard the others talking about you, how you got out of here and changed everything." Layla smiled, touched by the words. "Yes, Mia, but I'm still trying to change." The conversation with Mia reignited something in Layla. She realized her journey wasn't just about restarting her life, but also about helping others who were where she had once been. Back at the mansion, Layla shared her idea with John. She wanted to create a shelter for people experiencing homelessness. "I know it's ambitious, but I think it could work," she explained with enthusiasm. "I could manage it. I've lived through it and know what these people need." John listened intently, admiring her passion and determination. "I think it's an amazing idea," he said, smiling. and I'll make sure you have all the resources you need." Layla was surprised by his immediate support, but also deeply grateful. She knew that with John by her side, the project had a real chance of succeeding. As preparations for the shelter began, John received a message from the prosecutor. Carter had been officially charged, and his arrest was imminent. The relief was immediate, but John knew the battle wasn't over. Carter was a dangerous man, and even from behind bars, he might try to retaliate. That evening, John and Layla sat in the garden, talking about the future. The breeze was light, and the sound of the trees swaying created an almost magical atmosphere. "What will you do now that it's over?" Layla asked, looking at him. John was silent for a moment, contemplating her question. "I think I'll start really living," he said with a small laugh. "I've spent so much time focused on numbers, business, and profits that I forgot what it's like to enjoy life." Layla smiled, but there was something deeper in her eyes. "And you?" he asked, turning the question back to her. "What comes next?" She took a deep breath, gazing at the stars. "I want to focus on the shelter, but I also want to find my place." She paused, then looked at him. "And I think that place includes you." John felt his heart race. He knew there was something special between them, but hearing it from Layla confirmed everything he'd been feeling. "Layla, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me," he said, taking her hand. "I want to be by your side, no matter what's ahead." She smiled, her eyes filled with emotion. The fear and uncertainty she had carried for so long began to fade. For the first time in years, she felt she could have a real future, built with someone who truly cared. A few weeks later, the shelter officially opened. The inauguration was a success. Journalists, donors, and local authorities visited the facility, admiring the work Layla and John had accomplished together. For Layla, it was a significant milestone, not just for helping so many people, but also as a symbol of overcoming her own past. John stayed by her side throughout the event, watching as she passionately spoke about the project and the importance of giving people a second chance. He knew Layla had found her purpose, which only reinforced how special she truly was. "You look amazing today," John whispered as she finished speaking with a reporter. "Thank you," Layla said with a smile, her eyes shining with more than gratitude. It was genuine happiness, something she hadn't felt in a long time. In the days that followed, as the shelter began its operations, Layla and John finally experienced some peace. The case against Carter moved forward, and with the overwhelming evidence John provided, authorities had frozen Carter's assets and launched a detailed investigation into his other dealings. Just days later, Carter was arrested. It marked the end of Raymond Carter's empire. Even so, John knew his battle with Carter wasn't just about justice. It was also about protecting Layla. He wanted to ensure nothing would threaten their lives again. "He can't reach us anymore, right?" Layla asked one evening as they walked through the mansion's garden. "No," John said, taking her hand. "He doesn't have any power left. And even if he tried, we're not alone anymore." Layla looked at him, sensing the sincerity in his words. For the first time, she believed they were safe. Over time, Layla and John's relationship grew even stronger. They shared a deep connection, something that went beyond the circumstances that had brought them together. Layla, who once saw John as a cold and distant man, now saw someone who had found purpose at her side. One day, Layla sat in the garden, holding a cup of tea, as she admired the horizon. Since the shelter's inauguration, her life finally felt like it was falling into place. She worked hard to manage the project but always found time for peaceful moments like this. John appeared at the door, watching her from a distance for a moment before walking over. He wasn't wearing his jacket and his white shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, giving him a more relaxed look than usual. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting beside her. Layla smiled softly, her eyes still on the sky. "How much life has changed in the past few months. Everything feels so surreal." John watched her silently for a moment before taking her hand. "It's changed for the better, and you're the reason for that." Layla turned to him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "Me? I think you're the one who made it all happen." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You brought light into my life, Layla. Before you, all I saw were numbers, contracts, and business deals. You showed me what really matters." Layla felt her heart race. John rarely expressed his feelings this way, and hearing those words made her feel truly special. "John," she began, but he interrupted her, leaning closer. "You don't have to say anything," he said with a smile before kissing her softly. The kiss was gentle yet intense, as if they were trying to communicate everything they felt without words. When they pulled apart, Layla rested her forehead against his and smiled. "You have a way of making me feel like I'm the only person in the world." "Maybe you are," he replied, looking into her eyes. The days that followed were filled with similar moments. John made a point to carve out time for Layla, whether by helping at the shelter or planning small surprises. One weekend, he took her on a trip to the countryside, where they rented a secluded cabin surrounded by mountains and rivers. On the first night, as they sat by a fire outside the cabin, John hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Did you know I've never been this happy?" he said softly. Layla turned to face him. "Really?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Really. You brought something into my life I didn't even know I was missing." She laughed lightly, but the emotion in her eyes showed how much his words meant to her. "You brought me something too. Peace." They kissed again, and that night, under the stars, they talked about their dreams, fears, and the future they hoped to build together. A few months later, John decided it was time to make their relationship even more special. He planned a romantic evening at the same lakeside restaurant where they'd had their first dinner together. But this time, he had something much bigger in mind. Layla was surprised when John showed up with flowers and took her to the restaurant. The place was beautifully decorated, with candles and soft lights reflecting on the lake. The dinner was perfect, but she noticed John seemed nervous, which was unlike him. When they finished dessert, he stood up and gently took her hand. "Layla, there's something I need to say," he began. She looked at him, curious, as he pulled a small box from his pocket. "Over the past few months, you've shown me what it really means to live. With you, everything feels lighter, simpler, and happier." He opened the box, revealing a delicate diamond ring. "Layla Reed, will you be my girlfriend?" She was speechless for a moment before breaking into a wide smile. "Of course I will, John." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed to the applause of the other restaurant guests. In that moment, Layla felt her life was complete. Their relationship blossomed even more. They shared simple, joyful moments, like cooking together in the mansion's kitchen or watching movies on the couch. Layla loved how John seemed different when they were alone, more relaxed, more human. He, in turn, adored how she made him laugh, something he rarely did before. One evening, while preparing dinner together, Layla tried teaching John a recipe she had learned at the shelter. John, as clumsy as ever in the kitchen, ended up spilling flour all over the counter and accidentally on Layla's hair. "John," she exclaimed, pretending to be upset. "Sorry." He laughed, but when he saw her covered in flour, he couldn't hold back and laughed even harder. She grabbed a handful of flour and threw it at him, and within minutes, they were both laughing and trying to clean up the mess. It was a simple moment, but filled with love and companionship. A few months later, John decided it was time to take the next step. He planned a trip to a secluded beach where he intended to propose. The moment was carefully thought out. A seaside dinner at sunset, just the two of them, with the sound of the waves in the background. As the sun dipped below the horizon, John held Layla's hand and looked into her eyes. "Layla, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." He pulled a small box from his pocket and knelt in the sand. "You've shown me what it means to love and be loved. I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Layla brought her hands to her face, tears streaming down. "Yes, John, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the sun disappeared into the sea. It was a perfect moment, filled with love and promises for the future. Shortly after, they began planning their wedding. They decided on something simple but meaningful. The ceremony was held at the shelter, with its residents and staff as guests. To Layla, it felt right. The shelter symbolized new beginnings for so many, including her. On their wedding day, John couldn't hide his emotions as he watched Layla walk down the aisle in a simple yet elegant white dress. She was radiant, and he knew he had never seen anyone so beautiful. "You look amazing," he whispered when she reached the altar. "And you're about to become my husband," she replied with a smile. Their vows were heartfelt, full of love and gratitude. When they said "I do," the applause filled the room, and the kiss they shared marked the start of a new chapter in their lives. Months after the wedding, as they worked on plans to expand the shelter, Layla began to notice some changes. She felt more tired than usual and started to suspect something was different. After taking a pregnancy test, her suspicions were confirmed. She was pregnant. She planned a special way to share the news with John. That evening, during dinner, she handed him a small box with a note inside. John opened it and read the words, "I can't wait for you to meet our baby." He blinked a few times, confused, before realizing what it meant. His eyes widened and he looked at Layla. "Are you pregnant?" he asked, his voice full of emotion. She nodded, smiling. "Yes, John, we're going to have a baby." He stood, walked around the table and pulled her into a tight hug. "That's amazing." He kissed her several times, still processing the news. "You just made me the happiest man in the world." Layla laughed, her own emotions overflowing. "Are you ready for this?" "With you by my side, I'm ready for anything." That night, they talked about the future, imagining what it would be like to raise a child together. John couldn't stop smiling, and Layla felt for the first time that everything in her life was exactly as it should be. As John and Layla embraced that night, sitting on the mansion's sofa, they both knew they had overcome many challenges to get to that point. The past no longer haunted them, and the future was full of hope and promise. Layla rested her head on John's chest, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. "I think we've finally found our place, John." He smiled and kissed the top of her head. "Yes, Layla, and this is just the beginning." In the comfort of that moment, they both knew they were ready to face anything together. What did you think of John's actions toward Layla? Share your opinion in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell to keep up with all our stories. And be sure to check out more heartwarming tales by clicking here on the end screen.